Folks, remember how last August the Justin Trudeau Liberals announced that anyone who hadn't been vaccinated for COVID-19 would soon be barred from planes and trains? In many cases, these modern-day typhoid Marys, if you will, could no longer travel between provinces even, or leave the country, of course. So if you lived in Winnipeg, say, and wanted to visit your mother on her deathbed in London or Hong Kong, or perhaps even Quebec, you better get jabbed or resign yourself to never seeing your loved one alive ever again. Yet we were repeatedly told that these harsh decisions were based on science, and we had to follow the science, or the pandemic would surely be the death of us all. But now comes word that the so-called scientific civil servants weren't all that, science-y after all. Case in point, nobody in the government's COVID recovery unit, including Jennifer Little, the unit's Director General, had any formal education in epidemiology, medicine, or even public health. What the hell? And joining me now is Rupa Subramanya, who recently penned a superb feature in Common Sense News. Its title, Court Documents Reveal Canada's Travel Ban Had No Scientific Basis. What a disgrace. So welcome back to the Ezra Levant Show. Rupa, how you been doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for joining me. Rupa, your article makes for a scathing indictment, and justifiably so, regarding the government's travel ban. Let's cut to the chase, shall we? Why did the Justin Trudeau Liberals lie to us about their policies being scientifically sound?
Well, as I note in my story, the rationale, if you're looking for a scientific rationale, a scientific basis for these mandates, you're going to be hard-pressed to find one in these documents. It was clearly a political wedge issue, as many people had pointed out last fall. If you remember, the Prime Minister announced the mandates on August 13th, and 2 days later, he called the election. And it was pretty clear at that point when he called the election that the Liberals were really wanted to get a majority in place. And so and I think this was a political wedge issue. But unfortunately, they didn't get the majority that they were hoping for. But as for the mandates themselves, the travel mandate, the travel vaccine mandate, which is what this story is about, where was the scientific rationale? Where were the scientists? Where was Theresa Tam? She was not consulted on this. PHAC, where was PHAC? Where were the scientists, doctors, infectious diseases specialists, epidemiologists on this government panel called COVID Recovery, which falls under Transport Canada. The Director General of this group has a bachelor's degree in English literature, and these are people. She's the architect of this mandate, and she and the group that she heads. But you'd be hard pressed to find the science behind it.
And Rupa, here's the flip side to that question. If today they dropped these mandates, which, by the way, is causing all kinds of hellacious issues at airports in Canada, especially Toronto, ranked the worst airport in the world, by the way, Montreal, right. Vancouver. In other words, having the unvaccinated get onto flights right now and being treated like a full citizen, like the vaccinated are, would that cause any kind of health issue whatsoever?
No. See, at this point, what we know about the vaccines is that they're not very good at preventing infections. And that's pretty established. There's a large scientific consensus that points in that direction. So at this point, if you have mandates, and they've been suspended at this point, but if you're still making the case that the vaccine mandates helped prevent transmission, then you're just lying to yourself, or you're just fooling yourself at this point. We know that Omicron was a game changer as far as the pandemic is concerned, because everybody was getting it. I'm triple vaccinated, and I got COVID or Omicron. I believe I got Omicron 10 days later. So, and I have 3 different vaccines in my body. And so, the notion that somehow those who are vaccinated are not passing on the virus to other people, those who are and those who are unvaccinated are somehow worse than those who are vaccinated. And that notion is just ridiculous at this point, because almost everyone's getting infected.
Indeed. I mean, and to see this street theater play out about getting triple jabbed, quadruple jabbed, maybe quintuple jabbed, then it'll be better for us all. It's downright perverse. But the other issue too, Rupa, is the double standard and the hypocrisy. A few weeks ago, as you know, Justin Trudeau, after one of his junkets somewhere, got on a plane knowing that he was COVID positive and still flew on that plane. I mean, for goodness sakes, whatever happened to leading by example? And I'm sure, because this is the same prime minister who was behind these travel bans for everyone else. I see that, Rupa, as being grotesquely irresponsible.
I think I would call it. I definitely would say there's a certain amount of hypocrisy and double standard in how our elected officials treat how they follow the advice that they're giving us. So we're told to mask. We're encouraged to mask. But the Prime Minister himself has, on numerous occasions, been unmasked when he's overseas, but he's masked when he's back in Canada. So it begs the question, does the virus behave differently depending on where you are? We know it doesn't. So there's certainly a fair bit of hypocrisy. For example, I believe the Prime Minister is in Costa Rica right now. And I think he flew in a private D&D plane, if I'm not mistaken. No matter, he was, I suspect, several people pointed out that he was actually not masked on this plane, but we're expected to be masked here. So there's a fair bit of double standard and hypocrisy for sure, and it's been called out quite frequently, and I think more people are starting to see the double standard and calling it out as much as they possibly can.
Yeah, and you raise a good point about the masking double standard. Just earlier today, Rupa, I was at a press conference at Pearson International. Even though the masking mandates in Ontario ended on March 21st, guess what? This is the airport that time forgot. They still require you to wear a mask. Now, there's a few thousand people in the airport, but I could, in the days ahead, go down to the Sky Dome in Toronto and sit amongst 50,000 Blue Jay fans in one facility. There's no mask mandate. I can't make sense of it all, Rupa. Is it the coronavirus respects Blue Jay fans, but it hates international travelers and it will try to infect them? I mean, this is madness. How do you make sense of this all?
Well, you can't, because the science, what is the science? I mean, how does science distinguish between a Blue Jays game and an airport? Sure, one could say that a Blue Jays game is happening outdoors, there's better air circulation, and an airport is a largely indoor environment, and so with maybe not the best air circulation. One could make that argument, I suppose, but then you look at how other countries have pursued the masking policy, and it's really here when you board a plane to come to Canada and you enter and you're at a Canadian airport is when you have to be masked, or if you're on Via Rail you have to be masked. That's not the case in many European countries, for example. So again, the question is, does COVID-19 the virus behaved differently in Europe, Western Europe, India for that matter, a country of 1.1 billion people. I was there recently, about 4 months ago, and no one was masked, and there was no COVID apocalypse happening at all. I mean, I didn't see any signs of that.
So, Rupa, one last question. Since we now know that this policy, this travel policy penalizing unvaxxed Canadians was based on, lies and falsehoods. As you said earlier, Jennifer Little wasn't a doctor, wasn't a public health official. She was a literature major. I mean, to be or not to be. For her, not to be, I would suggest. But since we now know all this, where do we go from here? Is there the potential for lawsuits, maybe even a class action? I mean, I feel that the government should not be able to walk away from this. What are your thoughts, my friend?
Well, so I hope that there's some accountability. Well, let's first start with this. I think that the mainstream media should be paying some attention to this story. The fact that not a single person in the mainstream media has even acknowledged the story, or forget sharing it, but no one's even reached out to me asking me questions about what I wrote, and that's very bizarre. And I hope I want to give them the benefit of the doubt and say that they're still just getting their hands on these documents, and that they're going to eventually write something about them. So it's important that the mainstream media covers it as well, and eventually I'm hoping that there's some accountability. There are many questions to be asked. If you go through the transcripts, the documents, I couldn't get into everything because I was going with a certain story here. But there's lots in there, and it's definitely going to raise a lot of questions in the coming days. And then hopefully there'll be some accountability, whether it's in the courts or at the ballot box.
Now, Rupa, I'm thinking, why wouldn't the mainstream media be interested in such an incredible story as, oh yeah, I forgot, they're being paid by the federal government to stay in business. I mean, I'm sure the literature major Jennifer Little knows the proverb, don't bite the hand that feeds. What a disgrace. These are crazy times we're living in. Rupa, I want to thank you for your time, and I want to urge our viewers, go to Common Sense News, read Rupa's article. It is fantastic. You're not going to see it printed anywhere else.
What you just saw was an excerpt from my nightly show, the Ezra Levant Show. Every weekday, I do a monologue. Usually it's about half an hour. Then I interview an interesting guest, and then we read my hate mail or my fan mail, whichever is more fun. It's only available behind a paywall, though. That's how we pay our bills here at Rebel News. We don't take a dime from Justin Trudeau. But the good news is it's only $8 a month, about half the price of Netflix. And in addition to my nightly show, you also get weekly shows from 4 other friends here at Rebel News. So you're getting 36 shows a month just for $8. I think it's worth it. And even if you're not quite sure, do it anyways, because we rely on viewers like you to keep us free and independent. I promise you I'll never take a dime from Trudeau. Just go to rebelnewsplus.com and click subscribe. Thanks.